Hello everyone and welcome to the CDI webinar. I'm Jessica Welsh, our Consulting Director here at CDI, and this month our topic is Empower Springboard, how to put your ideas into motion and get a jump start on implementing your project ideas. Whether you attended Laserfiche Empower conference this year or if you have new ideas as a part of your annual plan or New Year's resolution, or if you're just new to the role of launching software projects at your organization, this webinar is going to give you the tools and processes you need to get those projects started. As we go through the webinar, please feel free to type any questions you have into the GoToWebinar interface, and I'll go through them at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, right? In order to start any software implementation project, you kind of just need to jump in. So let's talk about where to start. So the place I like to start is defining your project goals. And what we see is a lot of times this step can be easy to skip because you're looking forward to getting the software configured and getting something put into place. But defining your goals is a really important part of planning a new project. And the reason is that your goals will really help direct how you approach the project, what the scope is, what's included, and help you get your project completed within your defined either time limit or resources. So your project goals should really include three aspects. One is performance. So you should have an idea of what you're looking for the project to be able to do for you. Another side of our triangle here is time. So how much time do you have to complete this project? Is it something that should take a week or 2 months? What's your time limit for implementing this project? And then the last one is resources. So what kind of resources do you have to dedicate to the project, and how would you like to implement it, and how much resources would you like to have dedicated to this in order to get it up and running and off the ground? And the reason we put all of these three elements into our project goal is that once we get started, if we do need to adjust any one of these, either we ask more of the solution or the project that we're building, or our time that we have available goes down or up, a lot of times the other sides of this triangle will need to be adjusted in order to make sure that we can complete the project. So if we have all of these elements kind of defined, then we know which things we can adjust as we go through our project implementation. So to kind of help us walk through the steps of defining the goals for our project, I've pulled together an example goal. So here's one that we hear a lot. So one of the things that we work on a lot with our clients is contracts processes. And so this one is a goal that might be included in a project for implementing paperless contracts. So this one just says, our goal is to implement a completely paperless contracts process within 60 days using no more than 40 hours of professional service assistance and 40 hours of internal staff time. So you can see this goal will include all of our different aspects. So the main project that we're going to do here is completely paperless contracts, right? That's what we want for performance. For time, we have 60 days. And for resources, we have 40 hours of professional service assistance and 40 hours of internal staff time. And that gives us a really good definition of high-level overarching goals that we want to approach this project. And that's also going to help us define later on down the line what we can fit into that goal. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make your contracts process completely paperless. And there's a lot of aspects that you could include or not include. But having these sort of definitions of time, resource, and the overall performance will help us to define the constraints that we're working in for our project. Next thing we want to talk about, so once we have our goals in place, the next thing to talk about is requirements. So requirements are conditions that must be met to define the success of a project. That's how we're using requirements in this instance. So these are also the things that are going to define when your project is complete. If it meets the requirements, then the project can be accepted and it can go live. If what you've developed doesn't meet your requirements, then it needs to keep being adjusted or changed until the requirements are met. So let's talk about and dive in here a little bit on defining requirements. So requirements, when you're defining your requirements and you're outlining what you need your project to be able to do, it's important to involve your stakeholders at this level. So because what we're going to do with requirements is not product specific, so you can make your requirements for a software implementation project that don't even talk about, they could not even talk about what the product it is itself or what the, say, Laserfiche form should do or the workflow should do. They can be really general, like we need to be able to have staff be able to search for some type of document, right, and have it be available in a public web portal. So that doesn't necessarily have any defined requirements for software, but it's something we need the solution to do, and therefore we can test it. And so for your requirements, as you're kind of thinking about what do I need the program to ultimately deliver to me, try to keep them into something that you can test. Make sure that they can be product specific, but they don't have to be. They can be just functionality specific or something that users need to be able to do or have as part of their experience. And then when you involve stakeholders here, they should be able to have their input, which will overall increase your chance for a successful implementation and user adoption, which is always our goal. So let's take a look at a sample requirement. So here's a couple of sample requirements that are, general enough that they don't necessarily define how we're going to actually build the solution, but they're specific enough that they can be tested. So we're going with the contracts process again. And for our sample requirement, the first one is contract approval routing must be able to be changed at any point in the process and routed to any other participant. So this gives me some clues about what I might configure in my actual software implementation of this solution, but it doesn't necessarily define it at this level. So for right now, I just need to know that as a contract is getting routed through my organization, at any point in the process, anybody who's looking at or reviewing a contract should be able to choose the next person. So there might be a default route in place, but if they want to change it and say send it to finance for a review or legal for an extra review, that they're able to do that at any point in the process. That's something that we'll be able to test as we go through our development, and it's something that we'll be able to prove at the end, and if it's not there, then we can go back and revise it so that it is. Another example is might be a little bit more specific, and it might include something that I know for sure I will be able to implement in the software. But basically this one says key contract properties must only be entered once. So that might include things like vendor, expiration date, renewal eligibility, etc. I didn't list all these out, but as part of your requirements, if you have this available and you know that you're collecting certain properties or certain key metadata that you want to be able to collect at the beginning and have carry all the way through the process and be assigned either in the document itself or on the metadata at the end, the sooner you can identify those key pieces of information, the sooner you'll be able to ensure that they're included throughout the project. So in this case, we might be talking about form fields we might be talking about metadata fields, or we might be talking about something that we're pulling from a separate database. The specifics of the software setup and what the program's actually going to look like are not included at this point. It's just these are the requirements that we have that we'll need to be able to demonstrate at the end in order for this solution to meet our needs. All right, so at this point we've gotten our goals. That's kind of giving us an idea of the constraints of the project. We have some requirements outlined. Now let's talk about deliverables. So deliverables are what you're actually going to configure. So what's going to be delivered in order to be able to make this project meet your requirements and goals. And so this is where we translate the goals and requirements into specific software configurations. So anybody who's received a statement of work from Cities Digital will know that the deliverables section of our statements of work is where we define our data sources, our forms, processes that we're going to build, workflows, configurations in the admin console or the client. And this is where you would specify the exact places where the requirements are going to be met by the different software configurations. If it's something where it's a larger scale project, you could consider implementing phases of deliverables. So if you have a very long-term implementation, you may do a set of deliverables by department, or you may do a set of deliverables by functionality. An example of that might be if I'm implementing in my organization and I want my main project files or my main, let's say, client files to be in place first. I might have the folder structure, template, workflows, and security for the client files outlined first as deliverables. And then for the rest of my office files, I may define those deliverables as phase 2. That way we can kind of keep everything together and separate at the same time. So that will allow you to know what you're going to be building, but also to kind of phase it out. So once you have your deliverables defined, it will be important to also outline where your exceptions are and any assumptions that you're making. So as you've gone through and defined the workflows or the forms processes or the security or the data sources that you're going to build, you are making some assumptions of things that you're going to need to have in place or need to have available at the time that you build out that solution. So whether that's something that you're building internally or whether that's something that you're having professional services help you to build, it's important to outline those so that everybody is aware of the things that are assumptions or things that are not included as part of this project versus things that are. So examples of some assumptions might be a lot of times when we're building out forms configurations or workflows, we're tying into a SQL database, maybe in your accounting system or your CRM if you're working with contracts. If that's the case, then it is possible that you will need to put that in as an assumption that you'll be able to connect to that data source and that you'll be able to have someone who knows which information you need to pull from that data source who can define the columns and maybe make a view for workflow to be able to use. So if your process depends on a data source, a lot of times that comes in as an assumption that that data source is available. A good example of an exception might be something that you've decided not to include, maybe because it didn't meet your goal of resources or time at this time. So if we're implementing a large-scale contracts process, it may be that we're going to not include information about renewals during our first phase of implementation. It may be that after we defined our deliverables and we looked at how long it's going to take and how much time it's going to take to build out the workflows, the Word document merges, etc., that are going to go into the initial review of contracts. It may be that renewals and that whole process that are part of renewals will fall outside of the scope for this project. If it's something that you've talked about implementing or something that you maybe had thought about but is not going to be included in the initial build or this particular project, it's good to define that as an exception so that you know that if that comes up in discussion, it will be good to note and put on the back burner, but it's not necessarily something that's going to be implemented as a part of this project. Having exceptions in your planning documentation really just helps you stay focused as you go through your project implementation. All right, so we've talked about and defined our goals, our requirements, our deliverables, and our assumptions and exceptions. And so now let's talk about when to seek help. And so one of the things we wanted to cover in this webinar is how to really maximize your professional service time if you are accessing professional services to help with your implementation, or even if you're using your internal IT team. If you can get certain things completed ahead of time, then you'll really be able to get the most out of either professional services or internal IT time and really help move your project along even faster. So let's dive into this a little bit. So the first thing you can do is you can do a pre-planning meeting. And this type of pre-planning meeting that I'm referring to is just to get any questions of baseline functionality or licensing out of the way. So one of the things that's always a major constraint to software projects is what kind of software is available and what's the basic functionality of the software. So there's no point in discussing a project if there's no access to the software. So you want to make sure that you have the licenses that you need for the people who will be participating in a process, or you have a plan to include people as part of a process if they don't have a license. If you're not clear on what software you have available, a pre-planning meeting is a great place to say, all right, what tools do we have that we could even use for this process? And what are some of the potential? And having this pre-planning meeting can really help people get a good idea of what the possibilities are before they start really defining and setting down their goals and their requirements. For anybody who's been a part of one of our new implementations, we talk about doing an overview training, right? This is kind of helps get people an idea of which software they have as part of their solution and what the functionality is. And so therefore, kind of what's possible within the configurations. So on the little prep board here, we have a couple of things that you can do before a pre-planning meeting to help get the most out of this pre-planning meeting. First thing you can do is just make a list of questions that you have. If you're not sure what software you have or what's available, that's great to list out any questions. If you want to know if the software that you have does certain things, like does it allow me to send my contracts out through DocuSign for signature? Can I have vendors sign, or can it only be internal people signing it? Can I edit a Word document? Any kind of questions you have about what you might be trying to build or trying to do, it's great if you can have those listed out beforehand. And then if you have the ability to do any pre-planning as far as the goals and process that you'd like, it's great to have that outlined a little bit or even sketched out before the pre-planning meeting, because that's going to help you think of questions that you might have at that meeting. All right, so once you get through your pre-planning meeting, the next thing you can do is you can start defining deliverables, right? So, and getting ready to define deliverables. So this is where you take what you know about your business processes and your business knowledge, and then translate it into configuration deliverables. This is a great time, a lot of times, to bring in a software expert, whether that's somebody who's a power user at your organization or your professional services team or professional consultants. And in order to get the most out of planning deliverables, things that you can do ahead of time is define your goals within your organization, list out what your requirements are for the solution. And another thing that's really great that helps get a jump start on defining deliverables is gathering resources. So if it's a contract, again, if you have any spreadsheets where you're currently tracking contract expirations, vendor names, etc., or if you have a data source for that information, if you have that available and you know you have it identified ahead of this meeting, that can give us a good jump start. If you have forms that exist that you're planning on incorporating into this process, whether they're paper or whether they're electronic, those are great things to have available and make available to your person that you're helping or working with to define the deliverables ahead of time. And same with flowcharts. If you have an idea of what your process is and what it's going, maybe what you would like it to look like versus what it is now, if you can get that kind of outlined and defined, even if it's just something you write out on paper, that can help give your software consultant an idea of where they should target for the deliverables, which is the software configuration. Deliverables are really that chance to take what your process is and how you want it to be and translate that into the capabilities and functionality allowed by the software. And then the next thing is, so once you have your deliverables and everything defined, is you'll be doing the configuration meetings. And this is where you would take all of the information that you've documented and start performing those advanced configurations using best practices. And this is again where if you have professional services assistance from a consultant or something, this is where you would be able to use that and get the most out of it if you have defined goals, requirements, resources, and deliverables. Also, before you do any configuration meetings, it's really important that the programs that you need are installed ahead of time. So a lot of times when our consultants are working with clients and they have a configuration session, there will be in the agenda a list of programs that we'll need access to. Making sure that if we're working on your system, making sure that those programs are installed and available is going to help you get a jump start on that configuration time. And for anything that's a secured program, you'll need usernames and passwords. And so a lot of times people are logging in with Windows authentication, which works great for day-to-day work. But if it's something where we need to set up templates and fields or access a SQL database, it's a good idea to have that information accessible as well, or to have somebody log the consultant in to the server or to the program that needs special access. So having all of these three things prepped in advance of a configuration meeting will really just help you get the most out of it and be the most productive during that time. All right, so let's talk about resources. If you're new to defining all of these requirements and talking about implementing software projects, and maybe you don't have some tools that are available to you to make this easier, I wanted to just kind of go through some of the tools that we like and that we've used in the past that are free, available online, in case you want to start using any of these. So one of the things that can really help with planning out a project is just defining the flow of this, whether it be a form or whether it be a document for approval. And one free flowchart builder that you can get online is called Glyphy. You can just look that up on the internet, and it's just a little plugin that you can install, but it allows you to build a quick and easy flowchart that also looks kind of nice and professional so that you can either present it as your business case for getting a project approved, or you can present it to your consultant if you want them to build out the process. And remember, building out flowcharts can be two things. It can be, here's what we do now, so that's your current state, and it could be also, here's what we want this process to look like, and that will be your to-be state or your future state. Another flowchart builder, if you like this one better, there's Draw.io. This is another free flowchart builder. It looks a little bit more like Visio, if anybody's worked with that from Microsoft, although I don't have that included here because that's a subscription or perpetual license, but Draw.io will again allow you to draw quick and easy flowcharts. So those things help you kind of plan out your project beforehand and just document what the process flow should be. If you would like to start using a program to track the progress of an implementation, you could look at Trello, which is free task project tracking. You can see this is kind of a Kanban board look. So you have things that you're doing, things that are done. You can customize what this looks like, so you can track different tasks throughout their progress as you go through project planning. This is great. We've seen a lot of people in our client community as well as the greater community of users that we work with that use a board, a Kanban board or a Trello or something to help implement projects and track their tasks throughout the life cycle. And one more, if you want to start tracking those requirements or deliverables, a spreadsheet's always a great place to also track requirements, especially if you have a really long list of requirements for your project. And if you don't have access to some of the more common Microsoft Office products, there is Google Sheets that's available. It's a free spreadsheet program. It works really similar to Microsoft Excel. It's also stored in the cloud, so you have the ability to share it with other people really easily and collaborate with it, with other people on it as well. So those are just a few of our free available programs that you can use for planning and tracking your projects as they go through. Sheets would also be available or a choice for tracking your requirements and therefore your acceptance of your projects. So you can take your requirements sheet and then at the end, when you go through to testing, you can turn that into a test sheet. So you can test approval or disapproval of your different requirements as you go through your testing phase. All right, and so that concludes our project planning and our project launching webinar. Our next webinar, I hope you can join us for, it's Records Management Reimagined. And in that webinar, we're going to talk about the new features of records management that are available in the latest version of Laserfiche. They make records management more approachable, more intuitive, and even more, way more automated. So we'll go through some of those features and functionality. That's going to be on March 14th from 1 to 2 CST, like normal. So hope you can join us for that one. And if you do have to leave, go ahead. I wanted to just let you know that a survey will pop up when you head out of this webinar. And if you could take a moment to fill it out, I'd really appreciate it. We do look at those. Feel free to submit any ideas or requests that you have for future webinars. And get a chance to win this awesome t-shirt, which is kind of timely for today for anyone who's tracking what the holiday is today. You can win this t-shirt if you fill out the survey and give us your feedback. So with that, I'm going to open it up for questions, and I'll stay on the line for a little bit longer to address any questions that you have about project planning or professional services. And so feel free to type those into the Q&A area of the chat, and I'll go through them now. Thanks so much, everybody. All right, the first question is, will we be sharing the material with you via email or web link? And so all of the slides for all of our webinars are available in our Documents tab in our client portal. So if you go to our Peak Portal's Cities Digital Client Portal, you'll have the ability to download all of the presentation slides. And the next question is, do we have a checklist for an at-a-glance document to use for each project? We do have some project planning resources that we use that are usually Word documents. We have a Laserfiche planning document that we could send out. I will make sure that we put that in the resources for this webinar on our client portal so that everybody can have access to that. And somebody just looked up Glyphy and said that it is no longer free. That is terrible. So it looks like, I thought there was a free version, but if not, there are other free flowchart builders. So if Glyphy is not working to be free anymore, or doesn't have a free option available anymore, Draw.io, I believe, is still free, or I believe there are other ones as well. For today, thank you very much, everybody, and we hope to see you next month as well. Bye-bye.